This is I Scream, You Scream, your weekly scoop of the most chilling histories, mysteries, and true crime. Hello, I'm Gina.
And I'm Kathryn.
Every month, we choose a new topic and a new flavor of ice cream to go along with it. This month, we're talking about cemeteries, and we're having some ice cream dirt cups. Friendly reminder that if you like what you're hearing, why not leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform? It'll really help us out a lot, and in return, I personally will get down on one knee and ask you to marry me. I don't know what will come after that, but I will pop the question for you to answer. So grab a spoon and let's dig in.
Man, we're really out here making big promises.
I thought about promising to deliver the Holy Grail, but that seemed a bit too much.
Yeah. Proposing marriage is a lot easier to keep.
I can ask a question.
Yeah.
Up
doesn't
to
mean
you
you
how
have
you
to do the
answer it.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like proposing marriage doesn't mean like we've proposed a lot of ideas to each other over the years and not all of them have happened.
Yeah, like I keep asking you to marry me and you won't do it.
No, sorry, I already told someone that I would and I still haven't married him either.
You'll get around to it someday.
Give me time, yeah. You're phase 2. Give it time. So this is the last episode of the month.
Yeah.
We're going to have to rate our ice cream.
Yeah. We did this out of 5. Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5.
What?
Because of the presence of bits. There are so many bits in an ice cream dirt cup. And the switch from like chocolate base to a raspberry and gingerbread base
you
change the game.
Are you doing that again this week? Is that what you're eating again?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And I'm loving it. It's so good. Yeah. What about you?
I'm going to try not to do the thing I did when we transitioned to the 5 because my brother drew to my attention that I did like an exact, like I did it, what's it called in math where one thing is like I don't even know how to explain it. What is it called? You know what I'm trying to say?
I know it's like
Not
the similar
divisible
concept as divisible, but it's not divisible.
It's like, oh my God, what the hell is this word called? I don't even know how to Google this. Anyway, so basically I made a statement that I don't want to do out of 10 because I will always choose 7 out of 10. And then I accidentally did the exact ratio. I did like 3.5, which directly, I'm going to say translates to 7 out of 10, 3.5 out of 5. And I didn't mean to do that at all. Anyway, you know what? I'm going to say 3. This was a 3 for me. It wasn't great and it wasn't bad. It just was ice cream.
What about the Shack specific elements of it? Would you buy those again?
Okay, so I will say I think I've had a totally different dish every single time this month, so that might be throwing me off too, because I don't have a Shack today because I got real held up last week. I was like chewing one bite of that for like 5 minutes straight. So if you saw me struggling on the YouTube video, it's just because I was, okay? Like I had a real hard time getting through that. The Shack gummy, flavor-wise, it's great. It is a little too gooey, sticky for me. I don't love when things get stuck in my teeth, but they're 10 out of 10 for like just the fact that they exist. You know, like the fact that they exist is hilarious to me. So still, yes, would absolutely buy them again to like bring to a party or to just show people. Yes.
Just keep them in your purse. Like,
just like,
do you want to see something cool?
I still have them in the drawer in my office that I had them in when I was hiding them from Cinnamon. I didn't even move them back to the kitchen because I'm just like, yeah, this is my Shack drawer now.
That reminds me of the snack drawer that you used to have at work.
I did have a snack drawer. Yeah, wait.
You've evolved into a Shack drawer.
I have a Shack drawer now. I can make it my snack drawer. So for our listeners, when Gina and I were in an office together pre-2020, we obviously had filing. Well, I shouldn't say obviously. We had filing cabinets. I didn't know what to do with mine. We were a digital marketing company. There were not files in the office for years. So I put snacks in mine. I
It
had
rocked.
jerky, I had trail mix, I had sweet treats. That whatever, who was that guy who had the candy dish at his desk on the other end of the office? I'd take some of those and put them in my snack drawer. Yeah, that was
Every
great. That
now
was a
and
great
then,
snack drawer.
because we didn't have like plates handy, but we did have Post-it notes. And so every now and then I would come back to my desk and there would just be a little Post-it note with beef jerky on it waiting for me. And I would
You're
know
welcome.
Kathryn had been there.
They couldn't keep us apart. Even when remember when they tried to
They
separate
tried.
us with a wall? They tried. And don't worry, we'll post a picture of how we overcame that obstacle.
It was an exercise in creative problem solving and children's toys.
That was all you. That was great.
I'm proud of that.
You should be. I still have it.
I'm so glad you still have it.
If you're curious about what we're talking about, check out our YouTube or social media. We'll let you know.
But yeah, I think if you weren't a fan of this month's ice cream, I reckon next month's is going to be pretty good. Should we tell them what it is?
Yeah, why not? Let's do it all now.
Cool.
It was your brilliant idea, so you have to tell everyone. You keep coming up with the fun ideas.
I like the interpretive ice cream element of this podcast.
Yeah.
And every other element of this podcast. So next month, we're going to be talking about poison. And for an ice cream to go with it, we didn't want to actually eat poison. So instead, I Googled what common poisons taste like. And apparently, ammonia is both sour and salty. So we're going to have Cherry Garcia by Ben & Jerry's with some crushed up pretzels in there, because I would argue that cherries can be sour, pretzels obviously salty.
I'm very excited about that. I love cherries.
I have not had Cherry Garcia I can't even remember the last time. So I'm excited to try it again.
So
I like
good.
cherries too.
Yeah. Cool. Well,
all right, Kathryn.
In the meantime, before we hit up the cherry ice cream and poison month, let's wrap up. We have one more story for you. Well, we have one more episode for you. We have a couple more stories for you. But let's dive in to El Campo Santo Cemetery in San Diego. So the cemetery is the oldest. Well, I think it's one of the oldest in San Diego. I think it's like top 2 or 3. There might be 1 or 2 older than it. It's located in the Old Town neighborhood of San Diego, tucked up on a hill near San Diego Bay. There was an adobe house originally built on that property in 1850, and it originally was built to be a home, but then 8 years after it was built, the land would be purchased by a man named Don Jose Aguirre, and he converted the house into a chapel. And El Campo Santo was essentially the churchyard cemetery. So this Don Jose guy, who was he? He was also known as Jose Antonio, and he was an early Californian. He came to North America from Spain at the age of 15, and he originally became a citizen of Mexico before he settled in New Orleans. Shout out to New Orleans. And then he would later make his way over to the California coast, where he became a ship owner and trader in the city of San Diego. And he would end up becoming one of California's most prominent merchants, exporting animal hides to be traded for silks, satins, and embroidered materials. Which is like giving, I don't even know what it's giving. I just like that vibe, the whole like, oh, go out west to trade your hides for silks and stuff. That's like a cowboy era that like I feel like we don't talk about a lot. The whole concept of an early Californian in 1850 is also funny to me, because I'm like, as I was looking into this, I know that America is a very young country, and I know that California is a young state in the union, but it's just like, it does not compute. Like that is so young.
Yeah.
Like that's not that long ago.
Yeah. It's like, that's Manifest Destiny era, wasn't it? That was the whole shtick of Manifest Destiny, was like, go out west, claim your fortune kind of thing.
So yeah, this was all happening in that era. There was a lot going on in that era, and that was one of those things, yes. In 1841, Jose had married the daughter of a prominent landowner, Maria Francisca Estudio, and they would go on to have, it said 4 surviving children. That was a big thing back then, this era. I mean, anytime you're creating towns and moving west, this is deep in the mid 1800s. There's obviously a lot of illness and all of that. So
Tuberculosis.
Exactly. Cholera or scarlet fever was also big.
Dysentery.
That'll come up. Are we just naming Oregon Trail things?
A rattlesnake bitcha.
Butter churner. Blacksmith.
Butter churner. That was funny.
All right. So Jose had a brother-in-law, Miguel Pedrorena, and he was married to Maria's sister, Antonio. So their wives were sisters.
Cute.
So these guys are now married into this prominent landowner family. So they get together and they're like, San Diego's great and all, but we are now of a prominent landowner family. We're gonna use our money to purchase land and essentially create our own city. So they did. They ended up creating Old Town, which is now a neighborhood in San Diego. As an aside, I'm going to be bringing up more later, but it is worth noting that this land obviously was not empty when all these guys started coming over and purchasing the land where the cemetery would be built. The land that the cemetery was built on is land that is part of a region originally inhabited by the Kumeyaay people, and they had lived there for over 10,000 years before any of these guys came in. So super ancient lands. Our story starts a little bit after, like we were saying just a second ago. There was a huge influx in immigration and, the United States expanding westward. So nearly all of the Kumeyaay lands were taken under private ownership of the United States government. And it's a tale as old as time. This happened across many, many, many tribes, but they were pushed out of their ancestral lands in the mid-1800s and forced to 500,000 acres of tribal reservations, which, relative to the way you and I understand acreage, sounds like a lot, but obviously we know, relative to the land that was taken from them, is a small drop in the bucket. This will come up again later. It is important just to the whole background as far as how everyone got where. The fact that the cemetery is on Indigenous people's lands, it contributes to a lot of the energy, I think, that a lot of people feel there, which can be true for most places. But this one, because of the time period and when everything was built up, and we kind of talked about that era of time, Western cowboy type vibes, that is very much part of it. So these brothers-in-law, like I said, they get together and they decide to invent a town.
That's wild. Sorry, that's just insane.
Can you imagine? I was going to put that in here, but I'm like, maybe there are people out there that know what it's like to just be able to buy a city.
If you've ever bought a city,
podcast,
iscreamyouscreampod@gmail.com. Tell us all about it so we can move there.
Yeah, and also you want to sponsor us? Where is it? Do you have fun things to do? Is it?
I'll make a billboard
destination?
for you.
Yeah, I probably won't, but I'd love to visit. Yeah. Maybe, depending on where it is and what you guys have going on there.
Yeah, if it's a shit city, don't even fucking...
Yeah, if your city sucks,
only don't
even
cities.
Talk to me. Yeah.
Sorry.
I was gonna give an example, and then I was like, wait. That's dangerous. That's a slippery slope.
El Dorado. That won't offend anyone.
You can offend someone with anything. Okay, there's gonna be someone.
Fate,
There's going to be someone. I didn't like El Dorado. This podcast sucks. Anyway, so many of the original structures of the town are still there, including Casa de Aguirre, which is their family home. And the town itself, or I guess I should say the neighborhood, which was originally a town, became a protected state historic park in 1968, and it was registered as a California historical landmark the following year. There's a lot of fun things to do there. For example, there's A lot of the original family homes are still there. There's a place called Colorado House, which is a reconstruction of a hotel building that was there when the town was first established. It's not the original structure, but it's like a recreation. It also has the first ever San Diego courthouse. And then this is kind of an aside, but Chloe, I was there the last February, and Chloe and I went to a really yummy Mexican restaurant, which I'm like, listen, if you're coming to California, you're going to get really good Mexican food. Okay. Like just like across the board. So I don't know if it's like relatively great. I don't remember the name of it. It sounded kind of touristy. It was like Casa, I think like Guadalajara or something like that, which I feel like there's something like that in every city in America. But it was delectable. Their queso was bomb. I can still taste it in my mouth.
I miss
yeah.
queso.
Oh my God, it was so good. No offense, UK, but the Mexican there is just not, it's not it. But that's okay. Like, I wouldn't expect it to be. Yeah.
They're good at bangers and mash.
This is all to say that one of the most notable attractions in this area is the cemetery. Don't blink or you might miss it. It's very, very small. Was almost forgotten at one point in history. And there's just a really big history of like upheaval and ghostly apparitions seen to this day. Where did that all get started? This cemetery has existed since this town came to be. But like I said, there's been a lot of changes and everything like that. I found a lot of conflicting dates, which I found very interesting. There's almost like an aura of mystery around the cemetery. Please take a lot of what I say with a grain of salt as to like the history of changes and stuff. And if you have any like official records of anything, please let us know, because I tried to stick to just like official California documentation, much of which I could find, but there still was a little bit of discrepancy between years, like just a few years here and there. But yeah, if anyone has greater knowledge or more knowledge, please let us know.
That's interesting, especially given how young it is.
That's
relatively.
What I thought. Yes, like this isn't an ancient cemetery, but I think, and I'll walk through it here in a second, but so much happened relatively quickly that I think that is why it's one of those, like the timeline and the reason/way things happened might be different depending on who you ask. You know what I mean? Like there are, but well, we'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah. It is interesting though. There's definitely an air of like mystery around it, despite how talked about it is, you know, and like how young it, like there shouldn't be as much lost to history as there is. But there's a reason it was, so I'll go deeper into that as well. The dates that I saw most often is stated that the cemetery was in operation between 1849 and 1897. In that time frame, 477 people would be buried there. So like for roughly 50 years, the cemetery would sit essentially unused and untouched. People would still visit their loved ones. It was still a cemetery, a full cemetery, I should say, but there weren't any more burials after 1897. 8 years prior to that, in 1889, a streetcar was built and tracks ran straight through the cemetery. So that's disturbance number one. Yeah.
It's kind of rude.
So rude. Yeah. Well, and this was all part of the Western expansion. Like people were moving west, so they, you know, had a very sharp influx of citizens, and they needed to get from point A to point B. Very disrespectful to get them there through the middle of a cemetery, but like there was a lot of that happening, you know. Then, as it always does in any story, tragedy struck when the stock market crashed, and in 1929 we got the Great Depression. Shit sucked real hard across the world. And then in 1933, we got the New Deal. What was the New Deal? That was a plan under the Roosevelt administration that aimed to get people back to work. And this is the first time I've dug into the Great Depression since school. And like, I know things were real bad. I don't want to like come across like I'm like, oh my God, did you know about this? I know. Well, I shouldn't say we all know about the Great Depression. Maybe people don't know like the details of it or whatever. But like for comparison's sake, in April 2020, when COVID hit, the American unemployment rate was 15%. During the Great Depression, it was 25%.
Oh,
so like
shit.
just to use, something we all remember and know about, these are just the American numbers, but we're talking about San Diego, so that's the picture I want to paint. So things were real bad is what I'm trying to say. The New Deal had essentially, the point was and the focus was not just trying to create jobs for people just for the sake of creating jobs, but also they wanted to create jobs that would help with economic development and restructuring cities in a way that just made life easier for everyone. So, there was a huge focus in many cities across America. This was not just in San Diego, but this was like a national plan. The focus was on construction of roads, bridges, schools, hospitals, pretty much any public service or public space that could help people function in a way that allowed them to work and contribute to like a healthy economy, basically. In the same year, in 1933, at this point, the cemetery specifically was quite old and it had been run down, and there's a streetcar in the middle of it, and things have not been taken care of to the extent they could have been. There were other things going on, other like focuses that people had. So the San Diego Historical Society restored the cemetery as accurately as possible based on photographs that they had, early descriptions from the townspeople, things like that. They would like go through and literally like manually recreate what they saw or what was documented. They rebuilt an adobe wall, reset markers, rebuilt enclosures. They ended up placing a plain white cross in the center. The city was in development for many years, and as part of that original plan in 1942, the streetcar tracks that went throughout all of San Diego were paved over. And one of the things that was not changed in the restructuring of the cemetery was the streetcars. So in 1942, pavement went through the cemetery. Okay. So this huge disturbance, number 2, or 3 or 4, depending on what you're counting as big disturbances. Because of all of that, because of all of the changes, but particularly the fact that there is now a road going through the middle of the cemetery, it used to be much larger than it is now. Like I said previously, it really is just like kind of, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but it feels like just kind of a blip. Like you'll be walking down the sidewalk and all of a sudden in the middle of like bars and restaurants and shops, there's this little teeny cemetery just sitting there in like the middle of everything. It's on San Diego Avenue on the 2400 block. I have that written down for anyone who like wants to go visit. One of the most, I would say, notable things about this cemetery is the fact that so many, they're like those graves are still there underneath the pavement. So like they didn't dig anybody up, they didn't move anybody when they put those streetcar tracks in and eventually paved them. So those graves are still there underneath the pavement.
I have a question.
Yes.
With all of the disturbances, were the people who were buried there remembered, or did they kind of become lost graves where they know people are buried there, but they don't know who they are?
So in the 1990s.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, in the 1990s, scientists used ground penetrating radar to find those graves. And because of the time frame and the way everything was done, kind of, I want to say like, it was kind of done in chapters, and like records weren't kept as closely as, I don't want to say should be, because like so much was lost in the Great Depression with people like losing their jobs and like no one was keeping track of that stuff, I'm not blaming anyone, but like they were not kept as well as they could have been or should have been. So there were not records. Even though they found the graves of where these people were, they couldn't figure out who they were.
Okay.
So basically they inserted these little coins in the sidewalk and the road to commemorate them. Like, here lies someone who was paved over. I don't want to say accidentally, but like, So there is no name marker for these graves, but there are markers for these graves. That was the best they could do, like after, where this is 100 years later at this point, you
Yeah.
know? So yes, they did their best, but no, they do not know who those people are. They do know there are still markers in the actual grave yard, though. Like the part that does not have pavement over it, the part that is still a cemetery, they do have markers. And when the Historical Society was revamping the cemetery, they looked back at old records because I think they had the names of the people, but you can now see like a summary of some of their stories as well. So I think everything we just talked about, I think kind of explains this air of like mystery around everything, because it's like we sort of know a lot about the cemetery, but there's so much, like, again, lost to history. So that has created a healthy amount of history around everything. And where there is mystery, there is space for ghost stories. um, One of my favorite stories associated with the mystery of the pavement graves is what I'm going to call them. I don't know what locals call them, but I'm like, I can't think of any. The coin people? I don't know. I'm so sorry. Like, I'm so sorry. I do not mean that disrespectfully. I just don't know. Like the like cemetery graves and the pavement graves. It's not uncommon for car alarms to just randomly go off. And it is said that the cars that typically experience this, if you check, they're usually parked either on top of or next to one of the coins, because they're not all over the place. Like the coins aren't like you have to really, really look for them. It's not like every 5 paces there's another coin. They're kind of sprinkled all over the place, all up and down the block. So it's not like every car is constantly parked on top of one. They're kind of sparse, you know?
I love
So there
that.
are there are certain spots where there's a coin and a car close by is gonna like have their alarm go off. Another one is people have stated that they have trouble turning their cars back on if they're parked next to a coin as well. Like they'll get in and their car like won't turn over. So I think that's interesting. I love that because I'm
I
like, I don't
love
know,
these
like
ghosts.
I know it's like there could be an explanation, but that's just so specific, you know? But it's not just cars that are affected. There's strange happenings all up and down this road. Business owners also state that strange things happen within the buildings. Like I said, there's a lot of restaurants and shops and stuff like that on this block. Many have reported unexplainable electrical outages just out of nowhere. Lights flickering, appliances breaking, like brand new appliances will just up and just stop working and there's nothing wrong with them. Security alarms within the establishments will randomly go off and like nothing's going on. Just a bunch of weird glitches for no apparent reason. Another one is people have expressed experiencing sudden drops in temperature. One of the accounts I found said that it wasn't just like there was a cold breeze or whatever. Like we're outside in a seaside city, you would expect some temperature fluctuation, but people said that it felt like they were walking through a freezer. Like they'd be walking, the air was still, everything was fine, and all of a sudden the temperature would drop to like freezing temperatures. And that happens both on the block and in the cemetery, but also in businesses as well. And like these reports, I do want to be very clear. They happen all throughout Old Town Park. All of Old Town has a very old, obviously, history, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The cemetery is just one small part of it, and I think because the cemetery was so specifically affected, with like the pavement and the changes and updates and all of that, anytime you disturb a grave, there's going to be a story attached to that in some way. But it is worth noting that people have expressed seeing things all throughout the park. You know what? Let me clarify for anyone who's not been there, because I'm imagining it in my head, but I don't know if I fully made it clear that when I say park, I mean you look like you're in like a cowboy village. There's like a wagon wheel randomly sitting on like the side of the road and like stuff like that. So when I say
Tumbleweed going through the road.
yes, it's like that. There's like a dirt path and all of the shops and stuff I mentioned earlier. There's like old like saloon vibes to it.
Okay.
It's not like when I say park, it's not like a wide open field with trees and all that. It's like a town park. I just want to make sure that was clear because I know I mentioned the establishments that are still there, but I don't think I
When you
clarified that.
said
I'm not.
park, I was picturing like a green space. So
Yeah, and
cool.
I don't know what I just said that like jogged me to like clarify that, because that's not It is green because it's California and there's a lot of green space there, lots of nature and stuff. But when I say park, I mean just like an old cowboy village.
Is it like Westworldy? Sans robots?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And the reason I bring that up is because there are people that will be dressed in period
It's that
clothing
kind of place?
working there. Yes. Yeah.
I
Not
love
everyone
those
is.
kinds of
Yeah.
places.
Yeah, like not everyone is, but that is like yes. Like the
Okay.
blacksmith might be dressed like an old-timey blacksmith or something like that, you know. So just to clarify, that's the vibe. And the reason I just realized the reason I say that is because one of the things that people claim to experience is they will see someone in period gear or garb or clothing or whatever, and then like turn to like ask them a question or ask for directions or something, thinking that they are a park employee and the person will be gone. So it's like a, oh my God, did I just see a ghost type situation or what? Because there really are people there that may be dressed that way, you know?
Yeah.
A lot of the experiences people have are kind of poltergeisty and just things turning on and off and, you know, electrical glitches and everything I mentioned earlier, but there are some stories about specific people who still hang around. One of the most famous is a man named James Robinson, which I'll go into his story, but this is another one. If anyone's familiar with this story, I am curious on other people's opinions on this. Let me just tell the story and then I'll explain why, because I had kind of conflicting thoughts on this one. So he, like I said, he's one that frequents the block. You can see him often around the cemetery, but also just throughout the town. He's not one that is specific to the cemetery. He's more of like just an old town ghost. In life, he was described as, quote, a disagreeable man, and it was stated that he had a, quote, dangerous character.
Oh.
Those descriptions came from a Los Angeles Herald article from 1873. The article also reported that he and two other men at one point stole a boat from the harbor, and after stealing the property on the boat, they set it adrift out to sea. They like took this boat, took the shit, and then like set it loose. It
Cool.
like literally it like washed up on shore, like on some beach somewhere, however many miles away. He was taken, and here's the thing, like this wasn't his only crime. He seemed like he was the bad guy cowboy, like
That's exactly what I'm picturing. Yeah,
Yeah.
like the black
like
hat kind of.
the black hat and black gun, and the other guy has the white hat and the white gun. Oh my God. Anyway, we'll talk about that another time. So he was taken to trial for this boat situation and eventually executed by hanging for his crime of stealing the boat.
How
Do we
big
feel
was this
like
boat? Who owned it? What was on it that was worth him getting executed?
Thank you. So like I don't know, and I don't know, but like seems a little excessive
Seems like a
regardless of the
lot.
answer to those questions. My assumption is the boat was owned by someone very prominent and very rich.
Yeah.
My assumption is it was very large. My assumption is there was a lot of stuff on there because seems a little like, no judgment, seems a little excessive. I don't know what else this guy did in life, but like to be sentenced to be hanged for stealing a boat just seems, I don't know. I have questions about it. So if anyone out there knows why the hell that warranted a death sentence, please let me know, because it literally kept me up all night last night. He was hanged just 2 blocks away on the property where the Whaley house is now. And that, I didn't mention that house. It is another very prominent structure in the park, one of the family homes that was there. And that place also has a lot of activity. And he was buried in El Campo Santo cemetery. So he is one of the graves in the cemetery. I believe one of the ones that still exists today. He's not a pavement grave. People have said that they regularly see a large, very tall, dark shadow close to his grave, and there just seems to be a very negative energy associated with him. And all of the stories say that that is due to him being a bad guy, a disagreeable man, so now he's a disagreeable ghost. And I can't help but wonder, like, is it because he was killed for stealing a boat?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I do wonder if it's like, I don't know if I missed something on this guy. I don't want to like defend him if he did things that were like really, really bad.
But I am curious.
But I am curious. Yes, that's a good way to, yes. So if anyone know, I will keep digging and we can record a retraction if I find that he was like truly a horrible person.
Okay.
But I could like, based on what I found, it seems like I would be a real negative energy in the afterlife too if that happened to me. This seems like a product of the time where it was legal to just like shoot someone in the face if they looked at you wrong, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
and I get
yeah.
the whole like you can't apply modern thinking to like historic times because it was completely different.
Oh, for sure.
But sometimes I want to, so I will.
Well, yeah, and it's like you can understand that times were different back then and also understand that they were not good and we should not be operating the same way we did in 18 whatever the fuck. So,
word. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
same page.
Same page.
So another one that this one's also interesting. I'm just like rolling through my thoughts on all these ghosts. There is also a very popular story of people seeing a native man hanging around the cemetery. And the reason this one's interesting to me is there aren't any specific stories about who this man may be or why he may be there or like what his name is or who he was in life. There have been guesses as to who he might be, but there is no specific, like, this is the ghost of XYZ. It's just like an arbitrary, oh, there's an indigenous ghost in El Campo Santo cemetery. People tend to see him just kind of hanging around in and around the cemetery. He's often stated as floating a few inches off the ground and just kind of like hanging out. Like he's not doing anything. He's not scary. He's not mean. He's not cheerful. He's just kind of like vibing. There is a chance that this is a spirit or energy from someone who actually was there. Like I said, there were people there for thousands and thousands and thousands of years before this even was a town. Not everybody left. There were still indigenous people there when this became a town. It could be anyone, it could be anything. But I was digging into this, and one thing that was suggested about this type of story, and this isn't the last time I'm sure we'll talk about a ghost with no name, just like an arbitrary ghost that is randomly there out of nowhere and no one knows who they are. There is like a collective psychological response to big tragedies, like thousands of people being forced off their land. And one of them is creating stories like this. Many ghost stories are almost like an acknowledgement of wrongdoing without the burden of accepting fault or claiming fault or anything like that. So I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective because I think
that's fascinating.
It would be different if it was known like who this person was and he, was a man who had a story and something happened to him. But I kept finding conflicting things. Like it could be so-and-so, it could be so-and-so. And it's like, well, it's not, anyone in particular. It's a representation of this big thing that happened. That is not to say that it's not a ghost of someone, I'm just suggesting that these stories could also be born out of something more like psychological as well. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And
it was a rabbit hole I fell down. I'm sorry.
I love that. I think that that's such an interesting theory.
Yeah.
And I want to, when I have additional brain power, because if anyone can't tell, I'm fucking tired as shit right now.
Yeah, we're struggling today. We could say it's me too.
Yeah. When I have brain power, I want to try and apply that to other ghost stories that I've heard, because I know there are some. I just can't think of any at the moment.
You will. I did, and I can't stop. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying these ghosts aren't real. It's all in your head. Like, there's not really someone there, like, blah, blah. Like, there could be. But oftentimes, many times, the image we ascribe to something that may or may not be there is often collectively like, oh, I just saw a native man, did you? Oh my God, yes, me too. And it like becomes a metaphor for something. You know what I mean? So, not that I don't believe in a ghost story, because I will believe in every ghost story I ever hear. But there are stories like that. That is, I mentioned this book, I think in like literally, I think it was the Mercy episode. I keep bringing up the Mercy. I don't remember which one it was, but we'll insert a picture of it again. It's like the history of invisible women. Remember that
I
one?
remember you talking about that.
They touch on not exactly this, but they touch on like a version of this where like we've all heard a story of like a woman in white or whatever, you know, like you and I have talked about this plenty of times, but it's like, is she wearing a white dress or is that just a fucking ghost? And like you have to say she's in white because she was hopefully a virgin, you know, like whatever. Like
God forbid.
like she better be, even in death. But like that, it's a very similar psychological kind of response to what you may be seeing. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting. Like I dug to see like who he could have been, and this is kind of the rabbit hole I fell down. So yeah. Another one that I really love this one. This one I like, I didn't have a personal experience with it, but this is the one when I went to the cemetery. This is the one that I kind of wanted to have a personal experience with. I was really hoping that we would see this one. Her name was Anita, I think it's Gillies. I'm sorry if it's Gillis. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
That's how I would say it, I think.
First name's Anita. Yeah. So she was a little girl. She's one of the ones that her funeral was written about, and she had a kind of short life write up in one of the newspapers at the time. So her story is on the cross that is near her grave. So she died at age 9. It's not explicitly stated how she died, but because of the times and how old she was and just what was happening in Old Town at the time, it's suspected that she died of scarlet fever. So that's kind of why I mentioned that at the beginning, where like there was all of those different diseases. So they don't know for sure, but that's everyone's guess based on context clues. She is thought to haunt both the cemetery and the Whaley house, which like this kind of creeps me out. At the Whaley house, it is said that she can sometimes be found hiding underneath the dining room table.
That is such like a child energy,
yes,
but scary. That's creepy.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Yes,
Yeah.
that is such kid at like she could be doing anything. She could be like playing hide and seek. She could be not wanting to take a bath. She could like that's such a little kid thing, and so creepy.
So
like,
fucking creepy.
Can you imagine walking into a room and like seeing a little ghost under the table? Like, ugh, so creepy.
At first, I thought you were gonna say underneath beds.
No,
and that would send me.
Oh God, no.
That's like my worst
I can't
nightmare.
put my feet on the ground now. Yeah,
but dining table is very creepy.
It's the same vibe. Like underneath anything, anywhere you can stealthily grab my ankles, I don't want you there.
Okay,
like,
I can't have my feet on the ground either now.
Oh, me too. I feel like someone's behind me now.
I'll tell you. And then I'll reach through the screen Willy Wonka style and punch them.
God. I will say, ever since that one episode, I like keep my eye over
me
here.
too.
Because it looks so different. Like it literally, there's nothing there now. I'm so scared. Anyway, so speaking of creepy, there are accounts of young children being particularly drawn to her grave. I don't think there are like official tours throughout the cemetery because it's so small. You can see every single grave in 3 minutes. But people are like walking around the town or taking a look at the cemetery or whatever. It is said that children, if they're like playing or something, they are drawn to her grave and will end up like kind of playing around her grave. It is worth noting that people always leave offerings for her. Her grave is covered in little knickknacks. Toys, photos, flowers, trinkets, like literally anything you have. One of the rumors is the reason people leave an offering is because it is said that if you don't, she will follow you home.
Like the fucking Campbell's soup ads where it rolls off the shelf and follows you home.
Oh my God. Wait, so I love creepy. That that's where your head I love that that's where your head went. I was thinking more like a demon.
Oh, I'm thinking like
but
friendly.
She's not.
Wait, yeah. I want a present.
Well, and that's the thing. Well, and that's the thing. It's definitely likely more like that. And this is another one that like that's probably how the story started. Like, hey, don't leave. I want to play. So you leave something there for her to play with. But over the years, it has grown to be like, you must leave something or she'll attach herself. You know what I mean? It's grown. Yeah. But I'm sure it's probably very playful and most likely what you are describing. But the concept of a ghost following you home from a graveyard is a terrifying concept.
That
You
is
know what I
terrifying.
mean? So
That
it
is
has
very
like,
creepy. The idea of
yeah,
like sticky
yeah,
ghosts is very creepy to me, but it totally
yeah,
has kid energy.
yeah. I left her a hair tie because that's all I had. I had an extra hair tie, so I
Well,
left
did she
it.
follow you home?
Fuck, maybe. I don't
Well,
know. My house
maybe.
is
Maybe
haunted,
it's
so
her.
maybe, honestly, I don't know. Dude, I would appreciate if it was her because wait, I do have a kid ghost, Gina.
You do, yeah.
I
Maybe it
do.
is.
No, because I felt kid energy before I went to San Diego. I just
Oh,
remember
okay.
that was like the first experience I had here felt very like childlike.
Okay.
Anyway,
The search
but
continues.
yes, yeah. I know, right? This might, I don't know if this is my favorite, but these are all my favorite. Who am I kidding? There's something in all of these I really enjoy or am interested in. There are accounts of people seeing a woman dressed in period gear. I keep saying gear, period, like a period clothing, but she's wearing a very low cut dress and she's got a bandana in her hair and she stands at the entryway of the cemetery and it is thought that she may have been a sex worker who was
Love
banned.
her.
She was banned from being buried in the cemetery due to her profession. That is the story associated with her. So again, she doesn't have a name. I don't believe, I couldn't find one, I should say. If you know who this is allegedly a ghost of, let me know because I am curious. And I am curious if that story is true or if she is another kind of collective acknowledgement of maybe we shouldn't have been shitty to these people either. So,
Love that energy too.
yeah. I kind of like the idea of a whore ghost. Like I say that lovingly. I say that
A
with like
whore
the utmost
ghost.
a whore ghost. I say that with the utmost respect and reverence because like how fun would that be? Like I don't know. That's like I'm imagining a very like cheeky comedy about that.
Like
Right?
saloon time, like
Yeah, like
shit.
I kind of needed that energy when I was on my pilgrimage to San Diego earlier this year. That was a dark time for me, if you remember.
I do.
I would have had a lovely time hanging out with a freaking like what were they called? Saloon girl?
I think it
Like
was just
what was
Saloon
there like a?
Girl.
Okay.
I think they did have like
Do
dancers
you
and
know what
stuff
I'm
like
saying?
that
Like
though.
what is that called? What is that type of that there's a name for that. Like a something girl.
What the fuck?
What does it say?
Okay, so I Googled what were saloon prostitutes called, and the little bit on Google that like highlights, like before you click on a website, said
Uh-huh.
soiled dove was slang
Oh
for a
my goodness.
prostitute, as was fallen frail, painted cats, and nymphs du prairie.
Okay, none of those
None of
are
those.
best.
None of
Yeah.
those. I so much dig the idea of a woman sex worker. Like they told her you can't be buried here, and she was like, "Fine,
Mhm.
I'm gonna wait till I fucking die, and then I'm gonna stand right here,
Right
and you
here.
cannot make me
I
move."
know.
I
That's
love
why I
that.
love it so much. Me too. I know, me too. I love
Yeah.
that energy. So yeah, I mean we're kind of wrapping up here. Like I said, so much happened in Old Town, both before and after it became a town, and then long after it was incorporated into San Diego. The cemetery was particularly captivating. When we went there, I really didn't realize this until I started thinking of this, like how I was going to tell the story about it. But I realized once I was thinking of it and like looking through pictures and just like thinking back to my trip there, we spent a huge amount of time in the cemetery. Like it was almost like it really was kind of like sucking us in, like not in like a creepy way, but just in a very like, I just didn't want to leave there. Yeah, there was just like kind of a reverent vibe. Like there was so much energy there, but it wasn't negative. It was just like, a lot, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So definitely like highly recommend going. Again, it's very small. There's so much to do around the cemetery. So it's not like a pilgrimage or anything. Like you can go and hang out in Old Town. It is a very popular spot in San Diego. Like it is a tourist attraction, but it's not a tourist trap. That is something I want. Like it is cool. It is fun. So yeah, I took a lot of pictures there and I was very sad I did not capture any ghosts, but I was curious if anyone else did. So I Googled and I found kind of a fun picture on Reddit. So we're going to share this picture. I'll describe it. We'll share it on the YouTube. But I don't think I sent you this link. I think I saved this as a surprise.
You haven't sent me anything.
So I'm texting it to you. This picture, it's from a person on Reddit that said he and his wife went to the cemetery and she had been feeling a lot of really bad vibes. And as a joke, he like puts his hand out and is like, oh, ha ha ha, acting like he's hugging a ghost. And in this photograph, this is for the listeners at home, so I'm sorry if I'm like butchering this description. You should just go look at it. But in the photograph, there is a smudge / blur, like where his arm is.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. It could be anything. It could be a bug. It could be like, it could very well be fake. It looks legit. But yeah, I just thought that was a fun, this thing is like 10 years old. This picture was taken like 10 years ago. So it's like, you know, if you've ever looked up ghost photos in this cemetery, you've likely seen this picture. It was the first thing that popped up when I thought I was going to have to dig, and it was the first thing that popped up from 10 years ago. So that like doesn't often happen with searches. But yeah, I thought that was just a fun, even if it's not real, I'm like, all right, this is still funny. So like worth mentioning.
But at the very like bare minimum, it's an insane coincidence. Because the placement of this like smudgy ghost looking thing is
it's perfect.
It's perfection.
So yeah. Even if that smudge is not a ghost, I'm almost like, did someone make like a leaf fall at the right moment or like something, you know, like I'm almost like there doesn't have to be. There's always some explanation. There could be an explanation, but I love this. Even if it's not real, I like it a lot.
And the dark, like I'm sure this is not what it is, and my mind is making things up, but behind that white headstone, it looks like there's almost like a little figure crouched there, like in that kind of dark shadowy bit with its hands like that.
Oh my God, I didn't even notice that. I just got goosebumps.
That's creepy.
That seriously looks like a person.
Yeah. That's cool.
That is cool. I wonder if they know that. You should get on Reddit.
It might just be there were like things in the ground there or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it does look like that though. I see. Yeah. One more thing about this picture, and just like there could be weird like things in this photo because it looks like it could be one of those things where someone took a picture of a developed photo to make it like digital.
I see what you mean. Okay.
Because this picture looks like it could be older than 10 years old, but I don't know. Like that, any reflections or whatever we see could be something like from something like that. But I do like to think that he's just like posing with, you know what? I hope it's the saloon girl.
I hope so too.
All right. Well, that's all I have for you on that. As promised, we have another listener story.
Yay.
Gina does not know this one, so she is going to be reacting in real time.
Intentionally did not read it so that I could be pleasantly surprised.
I'm just going to jump right in. So this is a story that her parents told. This is not like she was not there for this, but this is something that she said her parents loved telling this one. So in eastern Colorado, there was a small settlement that included a lot of my family. Because of this, there is a certain cemetery that has a large amount of my family on my dad's side. Even though we don't often visit, we do always make funerals of relatives and then visit our close relatives' graves. I have 4 older siblings, and the middle child is around 5 years older than me. He was around 4 or 5 when this event took place. There was a funeral for a family member in late November or early December. It was cold enough that the light dusting of snow was still on the ground. During the burial, my brother had wandered off and no one noticed. After everything was done, my parents started looking for my brother, and they saw his footsteps, like in the snow. He was about halfway across the cemetery from where they were. He was just sitting on the headstone waiting for them to come over. When my parents saw the headstone, they were shocked that my brother had chosen that one in particular because it belonged to my great-grandfather that none of my siblings had met, since he had passed away long before my parents were even married. My brother said that something had drawn him to go and sit there, but he wouldn't explain any further. To this day, he doesn't like talking about it, hearing the story, or even going to cemeteries.
Oh my gosh. Well, now I have more questions.
Yeah, because I want to know. I want to know first and foremost. I want to know if he remembers this. Like, if he remembers, like, is he just afraid of cemeteries because he's heard this story, or like, does he remember something weird happened and that has caused him to be afraid? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder when, like, I wonder if it was as soon as he left that day, he was like, nah, cemeteries
Yeah.
are not a comfort zone for me, or if it grew over time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Brooke, tell us where your brother lives. I have questions.
Yeah.
I should say, please don't actually do that. That's like
yeah, we really are not trying to track people down here.
That's
We need
interesting,
name,
though,
address,
because
social security address. That's not what
passport
it's
number,
called.
please.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's interesting because it goes back to what you were saying earlier about the little girl's grave and kids being drawn to that too. And isn't it a thing that like children are more sensitive to that kind of stuff?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and you want to know why
Mm-hmm.
it is said children are more sensitive to that kind of stuff? It's because they have not been taught by society that these stories are ridiculous. And they have no inhibitions. Children have no inhibitions until you teach them that they need to. So, like, that's why kids are so intuitive and in tune with things like this. It's because no one's beaten it out of them yet.
That makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm. So, oftentimes, like, try not to say too much because I do want to talk about this in like great detail. We'll do a creepy kids season, or not season. What do we call these? Topic.
Flavors.
Month.
Flavors,
Yes,
month,
flavor.
whatever.
Yes. Not season. We don't do seasons. We're here all year round. But yeah, that is a bit like kids. Like, if a kid is telling you something weird is happening, you should believe them because like they don't have any reason to make that kind of thing up, you know?
Oh, I'm so excited for Creepy Kids Month.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be cool. But first, poison. And I'm really excited about Poison Month.
You were very excited about Poison Month. I think this one was your idea.
There are so many interesting, fascinating histories, mysteries, and true crime cases that involve poison.
And we, as promised, as usual, we will do all of them next month, starting next week.
Yeah. All right, bye.
So my thing, I'm like, I have more to say, and I'm like, we gotta just save it. I was nervous about Poison Month. Season again, do we need to just write this up? I was nervous about it because I didn't know. I was like, I don't know anything about poison stories, and I started looking into them, and I was like, oh wow, they're so freaking, like you said, like there's so many good ones. So, yeah.
So stay tuned, and until then, little spoons, keep it cool
and keep it creepy.